The crystal glitter of the chandeliers merged with the sounds of music. Subtle perfume scents and evening dresses of the ladies, he harmoniously complemented the atmosphere of the main stage of the theater, so as not to attract unnecessary attention. Camille, at the beginning of the performance side vision, tried to consider the audience, filled the parterre. But with the first sounds of the overture, all her attention turned to the stage. Light as if floating under the vaults of the hall. Melody filled her heart with warmth and expectation of something unusual, although Camille had never noticed in herself a tendency to romanticism. At some point she felt a delicate flower blossoming in her soul under Kalman's music. Perhaps this association was so strong that the girl involuntarily touched the hand of the man sitting next to her. Stephen immediately reacted. He gently took the hand of his companion and kissed it. Then just as tenderly, he took a curl away from the graceful female ear and whispered, "All like Pushkin. Sweet theater school, glittering boxes. That naive, admiring look suits you so well." Camille wanted to make a joke about the look in the same spirit, but did not have time, because in the back row some lady with a loud half-whisper said, "Young people, this is an opera, but not a flea market. Please behave yourselves." Stephen lightly turned his head in the direction of the disgruntled spectator. "I'm sorry, for God's sake." Then he made a serious face and put his index finger to his lips. Camille could hardly contain her laughter as she watched this silent scene. Stephen covered her small palm with his huge hand. The girl immediately felt a sense of peace and tranquility. This unusual mood merged with the music, and her heart exulted with joy. Camille enjoyed the play of the actors and thought, "Is this what happiness looks like? Or is this painting on the sand? Now a wave will come and ruthlessly wash away all this beauty." But when the main character of the musical production, Prince Jamie, sang his final song, the girl's confidence returned that everything will be fine, just like the main characters of the operetta, and for true love there are no barriers. And Stephen loves her. His gaze and the gentle touch of his hand tell me that. And I am ready to be near him all my life, to feel his breath and the warmth of his strong hand. But no one heard this confession, because the girl said it mentally. The applause in the hall did not stop for about 10 minutes. The actors came out several times to bow, but the grateful audience did not want to let them go. Finally, the heavy curtain fell, closing the door to the world of a wonderful fairy tale in which the prince can afford to marry the daughter of variety. Although Camille had often attended the theater, she had never before experienced such vivid feelings. Stephen intuitively captures the girl's mood. "I see she made quite an impression on you." "You're right, as always. Sometimes I feel like you read my mind. And it's normal for people to love each other. There's an invisible, thin thread that draws between them. And even at a distance, everyone can feel what the other half is thinking." A heavy sigh suddenly escaped from the girl's chest. "Stephen, what if we're wrong? What if our love is just an illusion? Like sand paintings. It's a very popular art form these days. I don't know what you're talking about. I'll try to explain. Look, an artist creates an unusually beautiful canvas. Spending time and talent on the work, but one careless movement of his hand, or a gust of wind. And that's it. No more painting." And so is love. Stephen stopped, struck by this comparison. "Camille, I don't think you've chosen a very good example. You can't compare a person's feelings to sand. Let's have dinner together. There's a very cozy restaurant nearby. It's got great food and a very homey atmosphere." "Thank you. But I don't feel like entertaining tonight. I don't want to interrupt the experience of the play with good food. Let's take a little walk and listen to the whispers of autumn." "Camille, you're a romantic. Your poetic gift is burning in you right now." The man deftly hopped on a park bench and loudly proclaimed, "No more scalpels and clamps. I am now obsessed with rhyme." This unexpected impromptu amused the girl. "You're very much like Mayakovsky. The same statue, the same intensity." "That's a good one." Such talent is wasting away. The man drew the girl to him. He's not lost, and you smiled. That's the most important thing to me. I want you to always smile, and that this smile was sincere, not fake, like an actor in the theater. I also want it very much, but it does not depend on me alone. I see the mood has changed course again. No, it won't do that. I'd rather watch you smile, my stern face left for the sick and my colleagues. Stephen fooled around for a long time, walking his fiancée home. He was an excellent psychologist and perfectly understood what was going on in a girl's soul before the wedding. The future husband did not like this mood of the bride and her doubts. Despite a rather long relationship, they dated for almost a year. A small rift still remained between them, and it bothered both of them. Many times the man tried to bridge the gap, but Camille was afraid to step on that shaky footing. Saying goodbye, the man made one more attempt. Are you inviting me to tea? No, Stephen, I'm very tired. Besides, let's not rush things. You don't have to tell me. I get it. You're trying to observe these old regimented customs or whatever that they're called. Camille, but that's stupid. We're adults, and in a few days, we'll be a social unit. Why all these conventions? Moreover, we already have such experience. There was resentment in Stephen's voice, and Camille immediately felt guilty about it. Hedgehog, don't get me wrong. Why the unnecessary conversations? There are certain limits. They may be silly conventions, but I don't want to overstep them. Imagine if the surgeon first, as it should be, opened the cavity and immediately rushed to sew it up and fulfill the main task of the operation. The man irritably threw Camille. Are you having some unhealthy associations today? I realize that all this is a cost of your profession, but such comparisons make me sick. I don't want you scalpeling me in the stomach again. Once is enough. The offended groom parodied the surgeon's work so expressively that Camille laughed again. Then the girl rose on tiptoe and kissed Stephen. Good. I won't torment you anymore with special physical terms and comparisons. That's better. I like kisses like this better. They're better than any medicine. Camille watched for a while from the window of the apartment she rented with her friend Emily. As Stephen got into the car, left in the yard before going to the theater, the groom never turned around or waved goodbye as he usually did. Doubts prickled again. The hedgehog and Masha returned to their souls. Love would inadvertently strike, although Camille did not categorize herself as a blue stocking, and especially fiery romances in her student years she did not have. She had little interest in the private lives of others, and she never took to judging someone for frivolity. Nor did she show any pity for the weaknesses of others. One day, Emily, with whom they had been friends since the first year of medical school, noticed this peculiarity of her friend. If I didn't know you well, I wouldn't have time to take offense at you. At this point, please elaborate. What's the offense? Well, you're a future doctor, and everything is, if I may say so, armor-plated. No sympathy from you, no mercy.
You don't know me very well. I'm no stranger to all these qualities, but I believe that even women should not show their weaknesses unnecessarily. It's often irritating. And in our line of work, it's not allowed at all. Yes to me,
Patients simply will not trust me if I start crying and wailing near each patient. Such arguments always sounded convincing, and Emily was forced to recognize the rightness of her friend. In her heart, she wanted to be as confident as Camille, and she fought hard against her shortcomings. During the long years of study, the girls had become very close, so that they looked forward to graduation with sadness. Emily decided to take this case into her own hands because she had a unique talent to penetrate into the souls of others. Girls often sent a punchy girl to the dean's office to decide in their favor some important issues. This time Evelyn, which was exactly how the girl's full name sounded with ethnic accuracy, On her own initiative, she went to solve the question of her first job. Camille knew nothing about her friend's secret plan and was surprised when one day she announced, "Camille, I want to tell you the good news that I have arranged everything in the best way possible, and you and I will be interned at the same hospital." If I'd known what it took to organize this, of course, you'll go to surgery, and I'll be in the gynecology department to fight for the demographics of the country. It cannot be said that young specialists were welcomed with open arms. Orange has been more fortunate in that regard. There was a shortage of doctors in gynecology, and she had to work day and night practically from the first day. Camille was long looked upon with distrust by her colleagues. The head of the department, a man with Bogatyrsky dimensions at the sight of a new member of the staff, even said, with undisguised irritation, "What am I supposed to do with you, Camille? You should be a kindergarten teacher. Or a manicurist. Not all men can survive surgery. A fragile girl like you, what can I trust you with?" It was very upsetting to hear that. So Camille, without thinking about the consequences, replied, "Do you have to be a heavyweight to stand up to the operating table? I think small people are more mobile. And I didn't know that your hospital selects staff by gender." The chief also did not expect such a strong rebuff from the young addition. He exclaimed with undisguised pleasure, 2-0 in your favor. Camille, I confess I didn't expect such boldness, but nevertheless, for the first time, work in the dressing rooms, and then we'll see. But I'm a specialist. I need practice. The girl could hardly hold back her tears, and the superintendent was clearly enjoying her helplessness. "We do everything that prosper through the dressing rooms." It's a kind of initiation. The young doctor had to go to the dressing rooms, but he didn't have to work there for long. One night on night duty, a man was brought in with suspected peritonitis. Camille realized that it is necessary to operate urgently and gave the order to the nurse, prepare the operating room. But this autonomy of a doctor who had been working in the hospital for a week did not please the experienced operating room nurse. "Camille, are you sure? Should we?" The doctor interrupted her younger colleague. "I think I've made it pretty clear. Prep the patient for surgery." Noticing her subordinate's confusion, she toned it down a bit. "You can see for yourself that the patient is a tough one." Every minute counts, but insistent, the nurse still called the heat. He showed up when the operation was coming to an end. He watched Camilla stitching for a while. Actually, Camilla's job is done by an assistant or an OR nurse, but it's still commendable. "And may I ask who taught you this technique? I only know one person who sews like that." The supervisor spoke with respect. He looked at the girl differently, but Camille didn't pay attention to these nuances. The first operation on her own had taken all her strength, and she could feel the weakness spilling over her body as she slowly freed herself from the obligatory surgical equipment. She replied, "Several times I have attended Christopher's surgery. He taught me how to sew like that." The superintendent shouted happily, "That's what I was talking about, Christopher. Hook! We studied together, but I didn't know he was giving a master class." The girl was a little embarrassed. "No, Christopher didn't specifically teach anyone. I just watched him and learned on my own. He lectured for almost 2 years. We practiced at his clinic, when it turned out that the head and the young employee has a common acquaintance. Between surgeons of 2 generations established almost friendly relations. But after the first independent operation, Camille's personal life changed. At the first round, her patient was operated on as well. First, I expressed my gratitude for the lives I've saved. You are my savior? Now I owe you till the end of my days. My roommate chuckled as he watched the scene. So Camille said, with contrived sternness, Stephen, you have a trivial appendix, but it's your fault the process has been pushed to the extreme. And I was only doing my professional duty in this situation. The girl didn't expect the patient to kiss her hands in gratitude. She was numb with surprise. And the nurse and Stephen's neighbor on the ward smiled openly. The patient. What do you think you're doing? Camille, when you're angry, and you're so beautiful. By the way, I'm single and quite rich. I'm not interested in your social status. As if to prove her point, Camille slammed the door of the room. During the traditional lunchtime tea party, she complained to her coworkers about a patient who was so insolent. What did he think he was doing? The head nurse of the ward, who was volunteering to set up a tea party for the doctors, expertly observed, "This patient's forgivable. Jonas is a well-known man in town. His father's a businessman, and he followed in his father's footsteps. I don't know exactly where he makes his capital, but it's something to do with construction." The superintendent decided to update the patient's information. Jones and his son are two of the biggest crooks the world has ever seen. Eggs don't wrinkle. They're buying up everything they can. Personally, I try to stay away from such characters. Camille didn't pay attention to that remark at the time. By the end of her shift, the whole ward was talking about the fact that a businessman from the 4th ward, where VIPs were always treated, was paying attention to the new surgeon. Camille overheard the conversations of the nursing staff as she passed by the nurses' station. You work your ass off, but you come to FIFA as a student, and starts making his own rules. If only that were true. It's like they're poaching prospective suitors. She's so out of your league, and this time you can't get an oligarch on the hook. Camille recognized the voice of the head nurse. She threw open the door of the nurses' station and said loudly, "Don't you have anything else to do? Gossiping during the workday?" Within seconds, the warm company scattered to their workstations. The head nurse really didn't like the fact that the intern's doctor had sassed her in front of her subordinates. She was used to the ward's strictly enforced chain of command. "An upstart. It's okay. There'll be a holiday on our street." Meanwhile, events were unfolding. Stephen was making a rapid recovery. The young man heeded the remark Camille had made during his rounds, and no longer allowed himself such liberties. But after his discharge, he met the girl every day after work. And when she was on night duty, he delivered hot meals from the restaurant for the interior medical team. At first, Camilla tried to draw some lines. But soon the businessman's charm and good manners won her over completely. Indeed, Stephen courted beautifully, but at the same time did not seek to force events. He did not pelt the girl with expensive gifts, emphasizing the intellectual side of the relationship. Like any businessman, he was a subtle psychologist, and very quickly realized that for Camille, the most important spiritual side of the relationship, not expensive bling. And he was not mistaken. After a month, the girl was so enchanted by him that she was constantly thinking about his words and gestures. In 6 months, she was completely in the power of this man, although she did not realize it only sometimes doubt. A prickly hedgehog struggled within, as if trying to wake her from a sweet dream. To Stephen's suggestion, Camille, without much thought, responded positively, although that this procedure was purely symbolic. Businessman long ago decided that Camille more than all the other applicants suitable for the honorable role of wife. He chose a life partner, guided by purely pragmatic considerations. But at the same time, the businessman cleverly disguised cold calculation beautiful courtship. In fairy tales, usually all ends with the wedding of the main characters. But history is silent about how the family life of Cinderella and the prince turned out. Although Camille was not a romantic person, she also believed that Stephen would be as attentive and tender as before the wedding. Emily tried many times to open her eyes. "Girlfriend, you don't seem like you've been a girl for a long time. Thinking like a teenager." "I'm surprised at that. I remember back in college you were a model of sanity for me. Does love really blind people so much that they can't see the obvious?" "What do you mean?" I'll be honest with you. It's not the only 2 times I've had the good fortune to be in contact with your Stephen, and you don't have to go on. Evelyn, you didn't like him? No, I didn't like him. And please don't call me by that obscure name. Or are you just doing this on purpose to spite me? No, I'm sorry, darling. It just came out. I promise I won't call you Reppin again. Well, that sounds good. And if I'm a turnip, then you're chlorine rich. I threw a pillow at my friend Natasha. She came back and it hit the window. Stop! The landlady will pity me and kick me out of the house for such games. I don't want to blow out the window. Good for you, Camille. You and your husband will go to the south. Then you'll live in a luxurious mansion on Rublevka. Later, the friend abruptly cut Emily off. It's all your fantasy. My sweet and most loyal friend Stephen has already warned that business matters do not allow him to leave the city for a long time. Therefore, our wedding trip is compressed to a week and then everyday life in a standard apartment in a new neighborhood. Alyoshkin, Dad decided to give us a royal gift for the wedding. Although for a girl from an ordinary family, a whole apartment of 70 square meters is a cool gift. Emily looked carefully at the bride.
Camille, tell me frankly, are you worried about something? The girl drank a glass of water. You can't see much there. And honestly, I am. What I don't understand is, why would you get married if you're not sure? Your Stephen seemed kind of slippery to me too.
Maybe we should postpone the marriage.
No, Emily. It's just that I've been going on and on in my head. I think that's a symptom of the old wives' market. Holy crap, Dr. House! We should put old maid syndrome in the International Handbook.
The girls fooled around for a long time more that evening before the wedding. Then Emily, with a seriously noticeable sadness, said to Camille, "You can always count on me. I'll live here for the time being. Perhaps they'll help me as a young professional to buy this place. So there will always be a place for you." Camille hugged her friend tightly. "Thank you. Let's hope I don't have to look for a fifth corner." There was a long pause, kind of sad. You and I had a girls' night out. It feels like we're saying goodbye forever. We don't need to break into two voices. Emily is on board with the theme. By the way, in the old days, brides and bridesmaids used to shed tears together. That was the custom, so we can safely say that you and I support the traditions of our ancestors. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. But Emily couldn't attend her best friend's wedding because she was urgently called to the hospital. However, the wedding ceremony took place in a reduced format because the newlyweds were in a hurry to get on a plane. Camille did not hide her disappointment, and throughout the flight did not utter a single word. Stephen did not even pay attention to the mood of his spouse. He did not take his eyes off the laptop until the landing at Phuket Airport. Only once. As if justifying himself, he said, "See, my dear, what a hard fate a businessman has." Not even time for a personal life. Camille did not answer anything. But the first drop of disappointment fell heavily to the bottom of the vessel. Patience. The next day was also marred by her husband's incomprehensible behavior. She woke up in the hotel and felt that Stephen was not in the room. The note was also not on the coffee table, where her husband's forgotten cell phone was resting. The woman was at a loss. My soulmate must have gone to the restaurant. Camille rolled her eyes a little, put on a light chiffon dress, and went downstairs. But there was no husband in the restaurant. A pretty Asian girl at the reception gestured toward the beach. From afar, Camille saw Stephen in the company of 3 girls. 2 of them were sunbathing without tops, not the least bit embarrassed by the children running along the beach. When he saw his wife, the man did not even try to hide his displeasure. "You could have called like that. You showed up unannounced. You left your cell phone in your room." I was worried. The man began to shake his shorts. "Shit! I was sure I had my cell phone with me." I wanted to take more pictures as a souvenir. Camille moved. The two ladies stayed put. They were being quite defiant. One of them was clearly getting impatient. Stephen, why did you leave us? You promised to entertain us all day, and then you wandered into someone else's camp. It was an impertinence the young woman couldn't bear. Stephen can't entertain you because he has a wife. You'll have to find someone else to entertain you, you amateurs. The women stared at Camille in amazement. An older lady, noticeably X-sides already pronounced. Girl, did you by any chance come from the collective farm? The second damsel, giggling, picked up the joke. Most likely, it's a nice provincial girl looking for a way to Shilyich. The insolent Babenka openly mocked Camille. Stephen was silent. He did not say a word in defense of his wife, and it was this fact that struck the young woman most of all. As if unintentionally, she kicked a long glass of green liquid, which stood next to Jacques. Older women. You ladies might want to pull your privates up a little on the schist lounge. Otherwise, someone will walk by and trip. This insulting remark was said loudly enough, and the beach was full of vacationers. Laughter could be heard from different directions. Camille did not want to stay here any longer. She rushed toward the hotel, but Stephen remained there on the beach. He appeared in the room about half an hour later. Camille, I didn't expect such an outburst from you. You're an educated modern woman, and you allow yourself to sink to the level of a market trader. I'm ashamed of your behavior in front of people. The woman expected anything but this. She looked at her husband and asked with undisguised mockery, Are you ashamed in front of these girls? The man could hardly contain himself, and his once affectionate hands clenched into fists. My dear wife, so that there will be no more misunderstandings between us. I want to warn you that I won't tolerate any more of this kind of behavior. Also tell your pretty little nose that I am used to living the way I want to live. Camille looked at Stephen and could not believe that she was looking at the pleasant and very tactful man she had been crazy about only a week before. How cleverly you, Stephen, hid your real face under the mask. Dear Camille, I am what I was and what I am now. Did you make up the perfect image in your girlish reverie? I'm like 100 and 1,000 other men, and I need a wife. They're scandalous. What do you need a wife for if you're hanging around other women of dubious repute the second day after the wedding? Irina. This question took the man by surprise. He fell with a swing on the soft shaft and threw his hands behind his head. Oh, why do I need wives? Probably because, like any normal person, I dream of a family, a cozy home, and kids. I'd really like to have at least 3 kids. So you see me as a female. That's how it works. Camille, are you making medical comparisons again? Honestly, I'm amazed at the way you talk to me. In fact, I think you should quit being a surgeon. But I'm a doctor, and I can't be out of work. Yes, you can, we'll find you a quieter place. Camille soon realized that her husband was a man of his word. Not a month after their return, he announced one evening, I've arranged a job for you, no night duty. Good pay. Maybe you should have asked me first. Camille was just doing the dishes. Out of surprise, the companion slipped out of her hands and shattered into shards. One piece stabbed itself right into the palm of his hand. Stephen did not even get up to administer first aid. To his bleeding wife, he only tossed over his shoulder. You gotta be more careful. As for work, I'll tell you one thing. I don't need a woman in the Duma who will be in the operating room all day and night. It's easier in such a case to call a girl at home. In my understanding, a family is a home, where there is always delicious food and a soft and warm bed. Stephen, why do you always talk about yourself? What about my interests? The man raised his eyebrows in surprise. A normal wife should live her husband's interests. In my mind, that's what a happy family looks like. That's how my father raised me. But I have a slightly different idea. You have to accept the inevitable. And Camille accepted it because she was ashamed to tell anyone that her marriage had been fractured from day one. Every day, the gulf between her and her husband grew wider and wider. But if before she had found solace in work, she had lost this beacon of salvation willingly. Superintendent's signing the application for dismissal, bitterly said Camille. You know yourself do not realize what a terrible mistake you make, and a person without a favorite cause is an empty place. The girl cried, realizing that the older comrade is right about everything. Because on the scale of one hospital, the news spreads very quickly. Emily learned about the dismissal of her friend from the surgical department on the same day. She literally burst into the residence room and, without paying attention to those present, shouted at her friend, "Camille, come to your senses. Without practice, you're going to lose all your skills in 3 years of disqualification. Is your Stephen really worth this kind of sacrifice?" Camille wept bitterly. She didn't change her mind. 5 years passed. The job Stephen found for his wife was indeed monetary, but it was not satisfying. Camille often became despondent. She wanted to change her life. But her husband didn't even want to hear about it. He often stayed at work until late in the evening, and she spent evenings all alone, staring stupidly at the TV screen. Then Stephen stopped sleeping at home. The cup of patience was already splashing over the edge, and one day she dared to ask her husband directly, "Stephen, if you have another woman, tell me not to torture yourself or me." The husband shrieked as if he were being pitied by a snake. "I'm surprised to hear you say such things. You reproach me, but you only show your dissatisfaction. When I married you, I thought this woman would make me happy. And what is it? I see that sour face all the time, huh? You don't even seem alive in bed. That's probably why we can't have a baby." Such accusations. It was very hurtful to hear, but Stephen was hurting his wife more and more. Somehow she wanted to meet a rich woman, but the husband did not approve of the idea that she wanted to cry in the vest. "Mole, such a husband is a bad bastard and a despot, does not let you breathe freely. No, I forbid you. If I find out you didn't listen to me, it'll be worse." Camilla increasingly began to notice that she no longer had the will to assert her right. Her husband had completely deprived her of the will to resist, and that was what frightened the young woman most of all. Probably everything would have come to a dead end, if not for a chance meeting with Emily at a seminar. A friend was struck by Camille's appearance and condition. How much had changed? Always an optimistic woman. During a break, they stopped by the cafeteria together for cups of coffee. Emily asked Camille without introduction, "Do you not look like yourself? Huh? What's wrong? Tell me. Maybe there's something I can do to help." And Camille burst into tears, filled with bitter tears. She told her friend and everything about unloved work, cheating husband, and his constant reproaches. Emily listened to this confession without once interrupting the story. "I think that in your situation, tears will not help. But to give yourself to the desires of her husband is also not worth it. I don't understand why you should have a child when your family is in complete discord." Camille looked hopefully at her friend. "Emily, help." "I know you can. Stephen wants a baby so badly. He'll change when he finds out there's a baby." "Are you 100% sure about that? Help me, please. I will. But first, you need to get a full workup, and then you need to bring in your Stephen." "No, that's out of the question. He would never agree." Emily thought for a moment, then said firmly, "Okay, then we'll do something else. But I advise you not to delay with this case. because it does not always work out. And the age for conception, let's face it, is not quite favorable. Camille did everything according to the instructions her friend had given her orally. She decided to tell Stephen about everything when the positive result was confirmed. At last, that day came, and the woman flew home on wings. But immediately at the threshold, she was dismayed by her husband. "Where are you going? Let's get ready quickly." "Hey, where? Didn't I tell you that today is our company's 20th anniversary party?" "Wear your best dress so I won't be ashamed of you." The woman went to fulfill her husband's demands out of habit. From the other room, Stephen was handing out recommendations. More makeup for the movie because you're too pale, but it will look unnatural. I have to teach you how to put on makeup and make it look decent. And do it! You're in a hurry, Stephen. I have something to tell you. Then after the banquet, you can tell me all about it. Camille felt like an extra at someone else's party. There were speeches of praise and beautiful toasts. Stephen tried to court his wife at first, but then moved to another table. Camille decided to leave discreetly, but before doing so, she went into the ladies' restroom. There was only one stall, but the woman realized that someone was there and decided to wait. Behind the thin door, first suspicious fiddling was heard, then strange sounds from the woman. She was about to get out as she realized what was going on in the stall. She was stopped by an unfamiliar male voice. "And keep your voice down. Someone might come in here." Camille jumped out of the door. The shock was so strong that she didn't know what to do. Go back to the hall or run home. While she was deciding the matter. From the ladies' room, first a young girl jumped out, adjusting her tight dress as she walked. Then Stephen appeared. When he saw his wife, he too was confused at first, but quickly recovered. "Are you following me?" The answer was followed by a resounding slap. "You called me here on purpose to embarrass me in front of everyone, Stephen. I can't take it anymore. What do you want, Camille? You're a fake wife. They're real. You make me want to cry, but you can't fulfill the basic function of giving birth to a child. I need a normal woman to give me an heir." Stephen was on a roll, and the drink and the attention of his colleagues only made him even more excited. The tipsy attendees poured into the foyer to gaze at the family scene. But the girl with whom Stephen was in the toilet stall, not the least bit embarrassed by the presence of his wife and lover. Apparently, she had not yet fully recovered from her pleasures, and now pressed herself too frankly against Stephen. Having listened carefully to his speech, she mumbled with a flying tongue, "Honey, if you need a baby, I'm ready. I promise to give you twins at once." The crowd roared. There was a round of applause. Then everyone shouted, "Bitter! Bitter!" Camille did not see Stephen and the promiscuous maidens frozen in a long kiss. She sprang out into the streets. She had one desire to get her things out of Stefan's apartment as soon as possible. She wanted to forget forever the man she had lived with for over 5 years and who had betrayed her so easily. She ran down the street, bumping into passersby, and in her head invisible dots in her head interpreted, "That girl is better than you for no reason. Her husband wouldn't trade you for her. It's all your own fault." To make the nasty dots stop pounding, Camille stopped and clutched her head tightly with her hands. Her behavior must have seemed strange from the outside, because an elderly man passing by asked sympathetically, well, are you ill? Should I call an ambulance?" "No, thank you. I'm a doctor myself. I'm afraid that at any moment may come back from the party." "Stefan." The woman quickly gathered the essentials. She was sure she would never return to this apartment again. But that thought no longer frightened her. Emily was very surprised when someone rang the doorbell at almost 0. But her friend's appearance and condition surprised her even more. Camille was scary to look at. Hair shot, makeup smeared across her face. Choking on tears, woman tried to say something, but from the inarticulate monologue, it was possible to make out only one word, he. Emily realized that something had happened that had broken her friend. She took a glass of water and poured soothing drops into it. Drink. Camille obediently drank. The spasms began to subside. She sank down on the shoe cabinet in the hallway. Emily asked demandingly, as if she were a patient, not a friend. Now tell me what happened. What was the hysteria about? You're not supposed to be upset. A new wave of despair washed over Camille. She looked around frantically and whispered, "It's over." Mysteriously. No more husband, no more family, no more hopes. Everything collapsed in one evening. So what? Don't you get it? I do. But your Stephen is a very slippery character. And I told you that before you were married. But love is blinding. You're right. As always. I wanted to tell him today, didn't I? Camille's eyes sparkled again. But just in time, she was handed a glass of water. Calm down, my friend. And believe me, everything that happens in this life promises to change for the better, and you'll be fine. Just don't let him in here. He's gonna come looking for me, I know it. I promise that bastard won't know where you are. You need to calm down now. The next day, Camille filed for a divorce. She expected her cheating husband to come looking for her and flinch at every noise. But Stephen did not call. He made no attempt to justify himself, which would have been natural in his position. He did not care at all where his wife was or what was the matter with her. A week later, the woman herself called him. "Stephen, I filed for dissolution of marriage, and I really wanted to hear that my husband regrets what he did and asks me to forgive him." But the answer was a laconic, "Okay, I don't mind." Camille sat for a long time, listening to the monotonous beeps that came from the telephone receiver. She didn't even ask which ones and where. Emily hung up the receiver on the machine. Try to forget him. I know it's not easy, but you need a fresh start. In fact, I'd advise you to go somewhere far away. I agree, but where would I go and what would I tell my parents? We'll figure out what we're gonna do. And you don't have to tell your parents. It's just that we didn't see eye to eye, so we split up. A lot of people get married and then run away. That's life. Camille worked for a month, as she was supposed to, although she didn't like working at the diagnostic center. The second layoff in 6 years scared her. But she was even more afraid of the unknown. Emily tried her best to cheer her friend up. Don't be upset. Though Badgers is a remote village, but you can live there. My great-grandmother lived there. We went there for a few years after her death, and then we abandoned everything. But the house is still strong, brick. True, the hating is sandy and other delights in the yard. But a man gets used to everything. But next to the forest and the river. In short, a paradise place. Thank you, my guess. There's no one closer to me than you. People say that time heals all wounds. Maybe I'll get better with time. But that's exactly what's going to happen. Trust me, it's only when you leave work that it's going to be a problem. I'm not sure they'll hire you as a doctor. Even a rural hospital will offer you a paramedic position at best. You know, I don't care. I'd be willing to work as a nurse or work on a farm. What difference does it make where I make my money? You have no idea how sweet it is to feel free. I feel like I'm growing wings behind my back. I don't know about wings, but the fact that you're about to start growing another spot is undeniable. You don't regret taking that step? Not at all. On the contrary, it gives me strength. Aren't you afraid of difficulties? It's very difficult for a woman to survive alone in the countryside. You know me, you're the one asking such stupid questions. The mechanical voice of the dispatcher announced the arrival of the train, and the friends headed for the boarding. Emily ran after the train for a long time. She gesticulated with her hands, trying to cheer up her friend for goodbye. She wanted to believe that Camille would be fine and that they would meet again one day. Did your wife call Stephen? The young secretary didn't have time to finish her sentence. Her petite figure became even smaller under the boss's gaze. This effect was reinforced by the huge size of the boss's office. The chief literally lived with the look of the girl who broke the protocol, but his voice was icy. I'm in a video conference call right now. I warned you, and you are like a fury. The girl flashed with shame and offense, and her wide-open eyes glittered suspiciously. But Stephen is there in the waiting room. Tell my wife she has nothing to do here. I'm used to dealing with family problems at home. That's the way to say it. Yes, that's the way to say it. The secretary quickly slipped out of the office, and Stephen rejoined the broadcast. The director of the holding company asked with interest, Stephen, is there a problem? No, everything's fine. It was a technical problem. Good, then join the discussion. I'm very much looking forward to your suggestions. Stephen had sketched out a few points the day before, and now read them out. The heads of the subsidiaries began to discuss the problems of the company, and he could not gather his thoughts. Or rather, all sorts of thoughts stumbled over each other in his head. But they did not concern work. Barely having waited for the end of the meeting, he shut down his laptop and went out to the reception area. When his boss appeared, the receptionist stood at attention, her doll-like eyes wide with fear. Stephen darted as he walked. Cancel all appointments for today. But Stephen Chief again turned a sharp glance at the uncomprehending girl. Weren't you taught that the secretary's job is to listen attentively and then strictly carry out the supervisor's assignment? You're always trying to get your 5 cents in. If you fail, I'll be forced to withdraw your services. The unhappy secretary cried quietly. But these tears did not touch the chief's heart. He looked indifferently at the girl and headed for the elevator. Only in the stage the tension began to subside little by little, but in his temples the blood rushed painfully. About a year ago, Stephen noticed that at the slightest excitement, his head instantly chipped. Invisible. Powerful. Lately, the attacks had become more frequent, but there was no time to visit doctors. The frustration was begging to come out, and he cursed quietly. What rubbish she'd had enough of already. Ian Russia no longer bothers me for trifles. What's her way of cowling me at work? Now I'll show her where the crayfish are. This vivid monologue was addressed to his young wife, who was almost 20 years younger than the businessman. After Stephen divorced Camille, he did not grieve alone for a long time. At first, to maintain domestic comfort, he periodically brought to the apartment familiar girls. And while female volunteers cleaned up and cooked him a meal, he turned on his favorite tracks, Kipelov, I Am Free. Often, the party ended in the morning and had to go to work with a head telling from the pain. Therefore, the optimism of bachelor life began to fade little by little. Painted maidens in time already without a businessman. Unkind changes in his son's condition, Robert noticed one day. He read a long moral to his son, and at the end of the lecture threatened, If I hear about your adventures again, I will kick out of the company to hell. Don't disgrace my name. You're not 20 years old to be dragging your balls after girls. I hope I made myself clear. Stephen was silent, staring at the floor. He always did that when his father did his parenting. Robert raised his voice. I can't hear the answer. Dad, I get it, and I've already learned. I promise not to go after girls anymore. I'll be tonsured tomorrow. Monks. Your stupid jokes are inappropriate. And remember, I'm warning you once you don't get it. I'll leave you with no money and I won't care that you're my son. Stephen knew very well that his father was a man of his word. After that warning, he was no longer in the mood for jokes. He resolutely cut off unnecessary connections and even changed his place of residence. Robert approved of the positive change. That's right, Stephen. One must cleanse oneself of the past in order to face the future with confidence. Hey, it's not health promotion, it's basic parenting. A fatherly one with a bun is good for you sometimes. Stephen had no other choice but to thank his father, and the latter, satisfied with the recognition of his rightness, warmed his heart. Understand, son, I wish you only good things. You can fall into the abyss very quickly, but not everyone can get out of it. That's why it's better not to go to the edge. Stephen saw that his father wanted to say something else, but waited patiently, knowing his parents' tough nature. Robert paced around his son's office for a long time, where he could come at any moment. Finally, after a long pause, he said the most important thing. I thought about this decision for a long time, because I had doubts about your candidacy, But now I see that you deserve my trust. I want to offer you the position of head of our Kaluga branch. In time, in about a couple of years, you will be able to return to the capital again. It is possible that the board of directors will approve your candidacy for the post of director of the capital office. This message was so unexpected that Stephen was confused, but Robert paid no attention to it. And Stephen, on a purely paternal note, I want to encourage you in your personal life. Noticing that his son was ready to protest, the man made an eloquent gesture with his hand and not quite successfully said, In your personal space, I'm not going to invade. God forbid. I just want to give you an incentive gift since you sold the apartment you got 7 years ago from me as a wedding present. I'm offering you a house in the Posada, and you can make some cosmetic repairs. You can move in. Stephen did not expect such generosity from his father and hugged him tightly. Thank you, Dad. The man was touched by his son's attention and said, I hope that you, my son, will be lucky in your new place. They say there is such an omen among the people. Indeed, Stephen felt much cozier in the country house than in the city apartment. Even the walls here reminded him of his childhood and teenage years. He quickly settled in the new place and soon met Jenna. The mature man could not resist the charm of this girl. It seemed to him that Jenna radiated solar energy. Next to her, he felt just as young, a candy bouquet. The stages of their romance did not last long. After 3 weeks, he invited Jenna to the theater, and after the performance, he proposed to the girl. The most decisive moments. He suddenly caught himself thinking that it had already happened once in his life. The theater, flowers, and shining partly female eyes. But the unsuspecting Stephen smiled just as Camille had after the kayak. Stephen felt his heart ache. The confusion must have been reflected on his face because Jenna cheerfully exclaimed to Stephen, I agree, you don't have to worry so much, honey. Now on the way home, Stephen was trying to figure out what day it was in his life. Again, there was a misfire. After all, the beginning of married life had been encouraging. Perhaps his constant busyness was the main problem, or was the cause something else? It was a question that had plagued him for the past few months, but Stephen had found no answer. He realized from his wife's confused look that she hadn't expected him to show up. What are you doing up so early today? I haven't prepared anything yet. The first word uttered by his wife caused a fit of a frenzy. Stephen could hardly contain his emotions. Of course. You're so busy. You just don't have a minute to spare. But Jenna did not seem to notice her husband's rage. With undisguised defiance, she said, I remember you yourself said that you do not need in the house at Darnica labor. So what claims you are now making to me? Stephen slightly slowed down. Okay, on this issue, everything is clear. But why call me during working hours? I forgave you. The young woman didn't even raise an eyebrow again. All right, darling. Just don't get too excited. Is it dangerous at your age? Stephen swallowed the hint in silence. When you're angry, you look so much like my father, and in general, I often began to notice that I see in you not a husband, and Daddy K. Such came to the schools of men. Is that why you called me? And the girl's painted eyelashes flew up to her brother's. What are you? Would I bother you for such a trifle? I have a more serious reason. Jenna, please don't shadow me. Say what you want. The man thought the young wife was hinting to him about money, which she constantly lacked for little whims. He was therefore surprised by her orders, said in a southerly tone. Sit down. Stephen obediently sat down. Jenna gracefully reached out and settled herself on his lap. The next second, she sunk a kiss on his lips. Only after such a vivid performance, with elements of theatricalization, the woman solemnly said, Stephen, your wish has come true. We are going to have a child. But naive, which spoke the wife, caused Stephen distrust. Are you sure? What's the due date, huh? Jenna immediately released her pantyhose. It's an interrogation, I thought you were excited. And what does the deadline matter? Direct. The girl rolled her eyes upward again, pretending not to do the calculation. Probably 3 weeks, maybe 4. God, Stephen, who cares? The important thing is that we're having a baby. The man stared at his wife once more, then dryly poked her chubby cheek. I'm glad. Thank you, darling. Buy yourself something nice. He tossed a few new bills carelessly onto the coffee table. Jenna immediately grabbed the money and jumped for joy on the spot. Don't wait up for me. I'll be back late for dinner. Stephen did not share his wife's enthusiasm, because he had great doubts about the pregnancy. His brain was working hard. As he drove back to town, the car sped along the empty road, and he kept thinking. But I'd been away for almost 2 months. Before that, we had nothing. There was a loud bending of the brakes. The sudden action made Stephen's chest hit the steering wheel painfully. Shit. If this is true, it means Jenna is cheating on me. The man felt the hoop squeezing his head again. Inexpensive. And you won't get away with it. A week later, the truth came out. On the advice of a private investigator Stephen had hired, he had installed several cameras in the house secretly from his wife. The detective also followed the evidence for several days. The results of the investigation shocked the man. But the real horror was felt by the young wife when her husband unexpectedly came home. Barely containing himself, he said, I'll give you 5 minutes to pack. Jenna tried to feign surprise. What's the matter? What's the matter with you? You have the nerve to ask what's wrong with me. He grabbed the woman by the arm and dragged her into his office, turning on his laptop. Stephen pulled a flash drive from his pocket. A moment later, a scene unfolded on the screen, with Jenna as the main character. You're the one having fun in my absence, and you're the one claiming to be pregnant. Get out of here. The man forcefully pushed his wife away from him. She couldn't stand on her feet and fell down. From pain and despair, Jenna began to scream. You deserve a title, Warren. You have no positive traits except money. And I don't regret cheating on you at all. I'm young and I need a normal man. Stephen could no longer listen to the screams of the woman who had betrayed him so despicably. He grabbed the woman by the scruff of the neck with one hand, as if she were a helpless puppy, and threw her onto the porch. The expensive outfits flew with it. Jenna cried and cursed him, picking up the scattered items. I'm not going to let this go. I'll go to the hospital. Have them take the beatings down. I'll put you away. Stephen knew his wife's character well. She could make good on her threats, but he had his trump cards. And if you're trying to mess with me like this, I'll leak all those pictures of you having fun with the driver. You won't be allowed in any decent home after this. And your dad won't be happy to see his daughter having fun. The last threat was the most effective of the mud-smeared clothes. Without stopping to hurl curses at her husband's head, she headed for the gate. Towards her ran out the driver, captured on newsreel footage. The guy was about to get behind the wheel, but Stephen came up and said firmly, holding out his hand, "The Kais, you're fired too?" A couple of sinners hesitated at the gate until the businessman shouted, "Go away, both of you!" The automatic gate slowly swung open and rolled over. And another unfortunate page of Stephen's life. After Jenna left, the soul was filled with a ringing emptiness. For weeks, the man could not recover. But the hardest test were the dreams that brought him back to the not-so-distant past. Stephen saw Camille's eyes frozen with horror and himself in the arms of that girl. The night visions haunted him even during the day, because they constantly made him think of that deed, which seemed forgotten, and the betrayal pressed heavily upon him. And it only grew stronger every day. Stephen decided to tell his father everything and ask it his advice. Robert listened to his son in silence. In such matters, there can be no counselors. Now, you have to figure it out for yourself and decide how to live your life. But treason is easier. It's a punishment for betrayal. That's how you have to take everything that's happened to you. Oh, but what do I do? How do I change my life? You can't change anything. It's too late. All I can do now is make up for my mistakes, if I were you. Although, God forbid I should be in that situation. I'd try to find Camille. I liked your first wife, an educated, very tactful girl, and a good doctor, head of the department where she interned. My good buddy Camille is gone. I don't know where she is, maybe to the ends of the earth. By the way, it's also a good option for you to heal your heart wounds. Stephen didn't know if his father was joking or seriously suggesting that he go to the ends of the earth. But this advice he had to remember very soon. To say that Emily was greatly surprised when she saw Stephen under the door of her office was not enough. She immediately did not recognize in this man, who, bent, obediently waiting for his turn, the former husband of a friend. The doctor even thought that the patient had simply gotten lost in the maze of hospital corridors. Man, are you sure this is the right doctor for you? It's usually women who come here. No, I'm not wrong. When the man stood up to his full height, Emily recognized him as a successful businessman, but now he looked so bad, she was afraid. "Stephen, what's wrong?" "I didn't even recognize you. I can help you with something." Emily's mind first turned to the doctor, and only then she remembered how much grief and suffering this man had brought to her friend. Stephen must have realized what a storm of emotions his appearance had caused. "I'm sorry, Emily, but I really came here in the hope of getting help." The annoyed women who were waiting under the office immediately murmured, "We are not sitting here for fun either." "Doctor, please take it according to the canister you've been given. Otherwise, we will complain." Emily tried to reassure the women. "Don't worry, I'll take everyone in." She took Stephen aside. "You have time. You can wait for me. You can see I can't hear you now. There's still a real complaint to be made. I'll wait for you in the car in the parking lot." "Yeah, that's better. You're attracting a lot of attention." The waiting time dragged on slowly. Stephen kept glancing at his watch, and it seemed to him that the hands were frozen in place. Finally, he saw Emily, and on cue so that she would not get lost in the parking lot. The woman waved her hand as a sign that the signal had been heard. A minute later, she was already sitting in the car. Stephen suggested, "You must be tired? Maybe we could talk in the cafe. It's warm and you can get something to eat. You know, I'd love to take you up on your offer. It's been a very busy day today. 2 surgeries, then an appointment. There's still a husband and kids at home." I looked carefully at Stephen. He spoke of his family with an unconcealed longing. She realized that this man was burned out inside and needed simple participation. As calmly as possible, she answered, "I have no husband at the moment. As the people say, there was gas, floated. There is a little daughter, but she is with her parents. My busyness does not allow me to be a good mom. But I realize you're not here to inquire about my marital status. I apologize for the indiscretion. Ah, this is a nice place, by the way. They have real Turkish coffee and delicious pancakes. Emily didn't expect Stephen to be so frank with her. This formerly self-confident man now looked very pathetic. Once in a while, he regained his poise, but it didn't last long, and then he was back with him. Emily, as a doctor, knew that this behavior was typical of addicts. She asked him directly, "Stephen, do you drink? Be honest." The man looked at her in surprise. "No, really. There was a brief period after Camillo, and I broke up, but I got over it quickly. Why did you ask me if I didn't like the look of you? And that tremor in your hands is suspicious." Stephen quickly hid his hands. "Uh-huh, that tried to remedy the situation?" "Forgive me, but professional habit often makes me look at ordinary things with a doctor's eye. I'm listening to you attentively." It was noticeable that Stephen was gathering his strength. "I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, but I really have no one else to turn to but you. Don't be frightened. I'm not going to cry now. Your fragile female shoulders. I apologize for that comparison. It's okay. Consider me oblivious to the oversight. Honestly, I don't even know how to describe my problem. You see, I've always been a confident person. I was raised that way by my parents. Then at university, luck walked beside me, and I got used to it and expected only positive surprises from life. Camille was a gift to me too. That's how I perceived her coming into my life. And that was my fatal mistake. It's a shame I'm only now realizing it. I dream about her all the time. And that wild scene too, as if it were real, repeats itself over and over again at night. But if I'm not mistaken, you had a second marriage. It must have been more successful." I understand the irony. But no, I was unlucky this time too. I don't want to go into details, but I was the loser. You see, life has a way of working things out. What I don't understand is, what can I do for you? Tell me, where's Camille? Stephen looked at Emily with a hopeful look, but she said no. Don't ask me that. Camille's just recovered from that disaster. You've robbed her of her job, her happiness, her future prospects. She can't take another blow. And I won't let you do it. Why reopen old wounds? I don't know. You see, I'm begging you, Stephen, forget about Camille and don't try to find her. You'll only make things worse. I'm sorry, but I have to go. I was on my way out, but I came back to the table where Stephen was sitting. I'd advise you to get yourself checked out. I really don't like the way you look. Stress can be very debilitating. You can miss a serious illness. Here's a card from a very good doctor. The woman held out a brightly colored plastic card, which Stephen slipped into the breast pocket of his shirt. Pro. But very soon, he had to remember Emily's advice. At an important meeting, the man suddenly felt ill. His head split open with pain. Flies flashed before his eyes. He tried to get up, and at the same second, he lost consciousness. He regained consciousness only in the ambulance. The young paramedic patted Stephen on the shoulder. But welcome back. Why did you let yourself go so badly? The man tried to get up, but the paramedic said sternly, Try not to move. You may have cerebral ischemia. He will go to the hospital and they'll examine you, and then the good doctors will do a complete overhaul. Stephen had never been seriously ill in his life, so when he found himself in a hospital bed at the worst possible moment, he felt helpless. One day on his rounds, he asked the attending physician, Tell me honestly, doctor, how much time do I have left? He looked at the status patient for a long time, and then asked a counter question. How much do you want? Such an unconventional answer caused confusion. The doctor watched the result of his therapy with satisfaction, but quickly took pity on this patient. I always thought businessmen were rational people. In my mind, they are like robots. That is, they can control their emotions. That's why you surprised me with Stephen. No doctor can tell you how much time you have left. You have to go to the heavenly office for clarification. But as a doctor, with many years of practice, I know that everything depends on the patient. So you're saying I'm fine? Well, not exactly fine. There are some problems, but they can be fixed if you listen to your doctors. After Stephen was discharged, he diligently followed his doctor's orders, took his medications, went to his treatments. But his condition only got worse. That's when he remembered about the business card Emily had left for him. Stephen was on his way to a settlement with a funny name Badgers. He was in a good mood for the first time in months. What added the most to the man's mood was the peculiarities of domestic cartography. He tried to have a discussion with the navigator about it. Probably only in our country. There are such names of villages and towns. Badgers, beavers. And also hamsters are not enough for a complete set. Although I'm pretty sure that somewhere in the vast expanses of my vast country, there is a village named after these cute animals. Okay, I'm going to Badgers, and that's great. Emily's acquaintance happily received the businessman. The doctor was very much like the fairy tale Ibolit, which immediately had a positive effect on the patient's emotional mood. He was tempted to ask the doctor about the monkey, but he held back. The doctor nodded and listened to the patient for a long time. Then he studied his medical history for another half hour. Your case is extraordinary. Do not consider me ignorant, but I would advise you to turn to alternative medicine. I don't see the point in prescribing you more pills right now. It's only going to hurt your liver. You should take a break and drink infusions. There are still women in the villages who can bring even hopeless patients back on their feet. I gave you the address of a good healer. She's only been practicing for a short time, but you can trust her. In the past, the woman was a doctor, and then decided to engage in folk practices. People praise her. You should try it. I don't know the woman's name, but Badgers is a small village, not more than 100 yards. I think you'll find her quickly. A healer or a shuffler. To be honest, I don't know what vacancies there are in that trade. The next day, Stephen set off on his journey to these unknown Badgers. I expected to spend at least 12 hours on the road, but he reached his destination much faster. It was useless to look for an inn in the God-forsaken village. Even the only store was locked, with several locks. Stefan realized that he had only two options: to spend the night in the car, or to turn to one of the locals. He chose the second option and headed for the nearest house. The door was opened by a young woman in her 60s. Come to our healer, often people come almost every day, and we do not refuse to shelter for a while. For points at 1R, you can make money. Stephen immediately took the eloquent hint correctly and handed the landlady a 5. She pretended to be surprised, but quickly tucked the bill into her apron pocket. I do not sing you in Hot Man now. And if you like, I'll cook you dinner too. I just got the eggs out of the chicken. And those tapes. Only in my distant childhood. Once vacationed with a distant relative in the village, so he was pleased to see how the hostess was tending to him. Just in case, the woman asked. There is a risk, of course. There's a chance that bandits are attracted to our village. That's why we have to charge a fee. But you're not a bandit. The hostess threw the guest an appraising glance. Stephen laughed. No, I have a more peaceful profession. I'm a businessman. I do construction, transportation. But the hostess was not interested in what the temporary tenant was doing. She kept her admiring eyes on her guest. A real oligarch. My goodness! Birds of such flight have never been brought to our Badgers. I've got a long way to go. I am a simple businessman. The woman was surprised again. Isn't it the same thing? Stephen realized that it was useless to explain the difference. By this time, Hamlet on milk had just arrived, which disappeared from the plate in a few minutes. I have never eaten such a tastier Tina. The hostess bloomed with praise. You bet. This is not store products homemade. The difference is huge. If the hostess cleared the table, but it was obvious she was troubled. Stephen tried to make it easier for her. Is there anything else you wanted to ask me? You guessed it. I guess you also have a talent for reading minds, like the national team? Do you? Our healer's name. What's her name in the world? I don't know. She must be local and old. No, she's not. She's still in her prime, but she came here about 7 or 8 years ago. It's hard to say for sure. No criminal record, and she lives in a back alley, in the house of an old teacher. She died a long time ago, and the house was homeless for 10 years, until a witch doctor appeared. But she didn't start treating people right away. At first, she worked in the neighboring village at the hospital, but then our only hospital was closed, and we all began to go to the roots. Then the townspeople came here too. The landlady really wanted to talk, but Stephen was almost falling asleep at the table. At night, he dreamed of his ex-wife again. She had her head with her and a boy about 8 years old, and this one looked so much like himself that he woke up in a cold sweat. It's like a King horror movie. And those badgers have stopped. Hey, I like to dream about all sorts of damn things. Not enough horror in real life. Camille was practicing with her in the kitchen when the bell rang. At first, she had to run out every time it rang, but then one of the local handymen she was treating for arthritis installed the bell for her. You do good things for people, and we want to return the favor. In general, the villagers were very kind and helpful. They did not shun her, as usual, avoiding strangers, and tried to help. Therefore, the woman did not feel disadvantaged in any way. When she had John, the women started to take care of the baby, with pleasure. In short, she quickly got used to her new life. Only sometimes remembered about her husband, who had treated her so ugly. But the past resentment ignited like a wound. No. Only on her heart remained a deep scar. At first, local cavaliers often visited her, hoping for the favor of a pretty znakar. Bachelors even came from neighboring villages. But Camille did not want to try her luck anymore. And among the local applicants for her hand was not such a man at the sight of which would excite the heart. Then the suitors stopped coming, but rumors spread around the neighborhood about an incredible series of witch doctors from badgers. But Camille treated people with herbs, drawing on the knowledge she had gained at medical school. The call at the gate was repeated, and the woman asked her son to spin nearby. John, go and open the door. The boy muttered unhappily, Mama, you should tell all these people that you have a private life too. The woman laughed. And where is it here? Mommy, in front of you. You're not going to deny that I'm in charge of my personal life. While John was clarifying an important question for himself, the bell rang for the 3rd time. The boy ran outside. The son surprised Camille every day. He was bright beyond his years, and sometimes his reasoning stumped his mother. Where did he get it from? Probably from his father. John's footsteps were heard. Mom, it's for you? Another sick person. It's not hard to guess I won't be eating lunch today. A day off is sometimes a good thing. The woman sewed the unruly hair back on the boy's head. It's all overgrown? It's time for a haircut. All right, call me, guests. John ran out the door again. Camille heard a visitor enter the house. But when she heard his voice, she flinched. I need Camille. Trying to cope with her excitement, the woman replied, Come in, I'll be right back. Camille's thoughts were jumbled in her head, lost in speculation as to how her ex-husband had managed to find her in this remote village. Emily must have given my address. She'd promised she'd just show up here. Camille had time to prepare for her past. But Stephen was surprised to see her. He recognized his ex-wife at once, though she had changed a lot. But the shock was so strong that it took him about 5 minutes to recover from it. Camille, is that you? I wasn't expecting you. Camilla replied calmly. Stephen, please don't make any of these scenes of surprise. I mean, you came here on purpose. I just don't understand why. No, I'm as surprised as you are because I didn't expect to see you here. Emily, for me. So Emily did give you my address. Listen to me, please. Your friend told me to go to a doctor I know, and he recommended treatment when he found out about the cancer. But I had no idea I'd see you as a healer. You're a surgeon? Camille, you forget that you made me quit an interesting job? I had to become a healer to survive with a child. Stephen felt as if he'd been enriched with boiling water. A terrible hunch pierced his brain. Wait a minute. That boy is your son. Why does that surprise you so much? Did you think I'd be lost without you? Drifted into the abyss. And I survived, and I'm even happy, because I have my son. I hope you're doing just fine without me too. You finally met the perfect woman, and you have a house full of kids. Camille's voice was full of reproach and irony, resentment, and bitterness. Stephen had exactly the same feelings. He could not help himself and shouted, I have no one! No one? Do you understand? John came running at the scream. Mommy, uncles, it's bad. Get some water. Stephen gave the child a scathing look. The boy was frightened and clung tightly to his mother. What's he looking at me for? It's not scary. Stephen, please go away. You're scaring the child. But the man didn't take his eyes off me. Suddenly he remembered that he had dreamt about this boy last night. Only in the dream his image was blurred, so he did not have time to see his facial features well. Suddenly he held out his hands toward the child, but Steckhole drew back. Camille realized that something was about to happen that could affect the child's fragile psyche. John, go to your room. I need to talk to this man. When the son disappeared into his room, Camilla said angrily, You've already ruined my life once, but I won't let you maim my son. It's not what you think. You better leave and forget I exist forever. But Stephen wasn't going to leave. On the contrary, he began to act too boldly. And Camille recognized in him the old man who had crossed her so easily. Looking back at the door of the nursery, Stephen whispered ominously, I feel that it is my son. He's like 2 drops of water, and I'll do anything to make sure he has a normal life. Camille sank tiredly into a chair. It's not your child, and I partly understand and even sympathize with you. But John is not your son. But the timing and everything fits together. You're lying to me. Are you trying to get back at me? I can't live with myself knowing my son lives in those damn badgers. I'm telling you again, John, not your son. Get out of here.
And the sooner you do it, the better for everyone. From the nurse's room, there came a joyous shout. Mama, Evelyn, my beloved Evelyn has arrived. The boy rushed to meet his mother's friend.
As he walked along, he told her the latest events in a lively manner. But only a few words could be heard in the room where Camille was receiving visitors. He's a nasty man, pretending to be sick, but he's looking at me. Evelyn, he's definitely crazy. Emily threw her bag on the couch, and then she sank down on it, exhausted. I guess I got here just in time. John, go to your room. Ugh, you. More secrets? I'm sick of it. This time, the boy was really pissed off at the adults, which wasn't hard to guess from the loud banging on the door. Yeah, I did it again. Good thing I got there in time. Because it's time to wrap this story up. From the looks on your faces, ex-spouses, it's easy to guess that you almost beat each other up minutes before I showed up. But what surprises me most of all is your persistence. Stephen, back at the cafe, I even sympathized with your grief. But there's a reason they say you're a hunchback. The man's awake. Don't you think, Emily, that you're letting yourself go too far? Why didn't you tell me Camille had a child? What's that got to do with you? Why should all the women in the neighborhood have to answer to you? You've been strangers for a long time, and everyone lives their own lives, which I think is normal. Camille decided to clear the air. Stephen just thought John looked like him, so he decided to make his claim. All children are alike in some way. But I have to tell you, Stephen, he's not yours? The man's on the rampage again. Where did you come from? He's just a stranger. I'm sorry to be rude, but I don't think you've been standing by a candle. No, I wasn't. Instead of a candle, I had a microscope and some other equipment. Okay, if you're so eager to find out, we'll press the truth to the uterus. Camille had been worried for a long time that she couldn't get pregnant. The exam showed no abnormalities. But your biomaterial, to put it mildly. In short, you can't be a father in the truest sense of the word. So it was my fault. The news was devastating to Stephen. But Emily was determined to finish him off. When it came out, I offered my friend an alternative IVF option using donor material. The procedure was a success, but by the time you found out, you'd already split up. That's the story. Stephen. And as life's villain shows, the boomerang always comes back to square one. The friends watched Stephen, head down, walk to his car. Emily asked Camille, "Don't you feel sorry for him?" I do feel sorry for him, but I don't want to start all over again. A man who betrayed you once is bound to trip you up again. Emily, is it true that Stephen is completely incapable? What answer do you want to hear? And why would you want that? And you know that answer very well. Then it's up to you to decide what you want to do. 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 Decide what you want to do.